It is another year, and it is another classic CRB and GiantsNinersDubsSharks mashup. It's a weekly round predictions for the NFL playoffs. Man, this season went by quick. I cannot believe we are already here.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, we were talking a little bit before the stream. I thought it was a weird season. We'll get into our predictions, but it felt like early on, like the injuries for like every team were stacking up. Expectations weren't really there. We thought, for example, the Jets and Aaron Rodgers was going to be this big thing, and that didn't pan out. And it really felt like a few divisions, in particular, like the North and the AFC West, like your Chiefs, three teams in that division making it, really stood their ground and kind of came out of the woods. So it was a weird NFL season, seeing teams like, that have never really made it, this far before or
Mm-hmm.
haven't in a while, like the Broncos, a decade almost of not making the playoffs. So I think it's a weird season. Definitely went by fast. The 49ers, for example, were favored in all 17 of their games coming into the season and then go 6-11. Like, I just think a lot of expectations were not met going into this season.
What do you think the Where do you think the Niners went wrong this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few different directions. I think, first of all, like, I will cut them a little slack when you're that injured, like they were. Christian McCaffrey getting out, Brandon Ayuk, not to mention him, holding out of the contract and not performing. And then the running backs as well. I mentioned McCaffrey, but Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerrero battling injuries, Ricky Pearsall, literally getting shot. That was the 49ers first round pick. So I think plenty of injuries stacking up. I also think, the fourth quarter just not being able to hold leads and really underestimating certain teams. I think they went into certain games thinking, it was going to be a breeze, and we saw what happened in the West with like the Rams coming out of nowhere and whatnot. So I think they underestimated teams in the fourth quarter, and then the injuries just stacking up. They were kind of the opposite of the Chiefs. They found a way to lose every game, kind of thing, instead of win, and it really plagued them, especially down the stretch.
Well, the Chiefs had a lot of what now is a popular term on Twitter, black magic, and
Yeah.
it's been hard to deny those allegations. But for Chiefs fans like myself, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, yeah, there have been some frustrating times, like barely winning these games, and sometimes against bad teams. And what can you do about it? A win is a win, and I think we're not going to be talking about the Chiefs really at all in this video because they got the number one seed. They will not be playing in the wild card this weekend. But just I'm really, really satisfied with the way that the team has performed overall these last three games. We're not talking about the Chargers game. That was meaningless. Carson Wentz, most of the starters, doesn't matter. But the Texans, Steelers, and what was it? Texas, Steelers, Browns. All three of those games, the team looked about as good as they have all year, and I feel better as a Chiefs fan going into the playoffs with this Chiefs team than I have the last two Super Bowl teams, and I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing,
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, obviously last year the Ravens are the number one seed in the AFC. What is your confidence? Obviously, you've seen the team win, three Super Bowls now. What is your confidence level maybe compared to, last year, the year before, maybe back to, 2019, 2020, those years? How has that changed over time now that you've seen them play in four Super Bowls and win three?
Well, the 2019 team was different because that was just they were a complete team all year and they blew teams out. They did what they were supposed to do. They if they played a bad team, they would whoop them. And they were an offensive powerhouse. Everybody remembers those Chiefs days with Tyreek Hill and whatever. They were an offensive powerhouse. They would put up 30, 40 points a week like it was nothing. And it was just one of those things I will never forget in 2019. It was about week 16 or 17. We played like the Bears or something, and we just like whooped them. It was like yet another whooping. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is everything feels right. Like, this just feels like it's our time. And sure enough, we went on to win the Super Bowl that year. It was different. The Chiefs have just completely... they've completely dismantled my perception of them mentally because they've looked horrible going into the playoffs the last two seasons and end up winning the Super Bowl in both seasons. 2022 and 2023 going into the playoffs, I thought this team is not going to be very competitive in the playoffs. 2022, we took a really bad, struggling Texans team, who I think ended with the number 1 or number 2 overall pick that season. They took us to overtime. It took overtime for us to win. That was like one of the last games of the regular season. Last season, 2023, we lose to the Raiders at Arrowhead on Christmas Day, second to last week of the regular season, and looking terrible in the process. Can't get anything going offensively. And both these last 2 seasons, I'm like, dude, we're not going to be competitive in the playoffs. And they find a way to go win the Super Bowl anyways. And so it's just completely changed my perception of this team going into the playoffs. I really believe, and I say these in my recaps every week, I really believe that the Chiefs treat the regular season like practice. Andy Reid, he draws up schemes, he tests things, he experiments. That way, when you get to the playoffs, you know it works, you know what you have to do to win games. And that's why you see in all these close Chiefs games where the Chiefs have to go down and get a field goal to win a game, or it's overtime, they have to go get a touchdown to win the game. They do it like it's nothing after struggling the whole prior 4 quarters of the game, because they run their plays that they know will work. And it's the same thing in the playoffs. And once you get to the playoffs, you unlock a whole new animal in Mahomes, which is, of course, him being able to run. They never have any running plays with Mahomes. No design run plays. If he's got a collapsing pocket, he'll scramble and get some yards when he needs to, but it's not planned. In the playoffs, we saw it against the Eagles 2 years ago, and against the Niners, in the Super Bowl last year, where Mahomes unlocks these plays that he does not do in the regular season that requires him to run, and it just kills the opponent. The Chiefs just become a different team in the playoffs, period. And as far as how I felt going into the playoffs, this is the best I have felt since 2019 of any Chiefs playoff team going into the playoffs. I'm really, really confident. And people love talking about the Bills. Oh, the Bills, it's their time. It's, they're got to beat the Chiefs eventually. They say the same thing every year. And the Bills beat us in the regular season this year. And that was in Buffalo. And if Josh Allen didn't get that fourth quarter, fourth and two run that turned into a touchdown, if the Chiefs defense held him there, Chiefs probably win that game. So, and that's in Buffalo, and that's a practicing Chiefs team. Look, after last year's gauntlet of a schedule on the path to the Super Bowl, you start your postseason with a wild card and negative 26 wind chill against Miami. Then you go on the road to Buffalo in the divisional, on the road in the AFC Championship to the Baltimore Ravens, and then Super Bowl against the best or second best team in the league last year, which is, of course, the 49ers. They got through all of that last year. And now we have home field advantages here with the 1 seed. I feel pretty damn good going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And I mean, I think the matchup is interesting too, because you're either taking on a division rival in the Chargers, obviously it'd be the third time you play them this year, or you're taking on... Personally. I agree with you, and of course we'll get into our predictions. Or you take on the Texans, a team like you mentioned that you have history with. Maybe a bit of a different looking Texans team, and certainly I think an underwhelming Texans team this season. And we can get into that. Maybe we can jump in to Chargers Texans. I agree with you. I mean, I think the Chargers take this one. I think we talk about complete teams. They've looked very complete this year. Justin Herbert is obviously a top quarterback in this league. He's figured out how to navigate an offense, by using some of the tools that maybe aren't the shiniest tools in the toolbox. You lose Keenan Allen, you lose Mike Williams, and they bring in guys like Ladd McConkey, who's, I think a top rookie wide receiver, and he wasn't expected to be, right? It was all about, Malik Neighbors this, Brian Thomas that. Brian Thomas is very good. And Marvin Harrison this, but Ladd McConkey is very underrated. So I do like the Chargers in that wild card game. I also think the Texans with their injuries, that scary injury, a couple weeks ago, receiver, I'm blanking, is it Tank Dell or Nico Collins? I get the two mixed up. Yeah. Tank Dell, sad for him. I mean, he's been injured all the time. And CJ Stroud just, he's a great quarterback. I think it's sort of like the sophomore slump. We see it with, Connor Bedard in hockey right now. You saw it with Julio Rodriguez. Like, these top guys have to make up for, what they accomplished. Obviously, he did great things last year. But I think the Chargers take this, and I know they're on the road, but Justin Herbert has that resiliency. He's a top quarterback in this league, and I think we're going to have an AFC division. When's the last time we could say that we saw that? An AFC West divisional playoff round with rivals, from the AFC West. I can't remember the last time. Probably a long time ago.
At least 10 years
Actually,
ago.
yeah, because the Broncos I know played the Chiefs, and I know those games. I mean, that's such a historic division. AFL teams, the Raiders Chiefs rivalry goes back 65 years. Chargers Broncos, those are classic teams. So I think we're going to have a matchup like that, and I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, well, let's be real. Jim Harbaugh turned the Chargers around. Hell of an upgrade from Brandon Staley. And look, Chargers, Harbaugh has unlocked Justin Herbert's potential. We always knew that Herbert was a good quarterback with just a bad situation around him, and he's unlocked himself this year. The Chargers have been a very competitive team. I will say the Chiefs beat them pretty soundly in both games, and that scares me if we end up playing them in the second round, because to beat the same team 3 times is such a difficult task to do. And when there was a lot of noise going around about, the Chiefs they got lucky against the Raiders. The Raiders is a terrible team. It's like, okay, well, division rivals are always tough games. It doesn't matter how poor one team is. So, yeah, I think it scares me. The Chargers, they're a strange team to me, because they'll let the Buccaneers score 40 on them, but then beat the Broncos the week before and put up 40 and 34 against the Raiders and Patriots the 2 weeks before that. And I know that's not necessarily... Oh, that's... I'm sorry, that's reverse order, the 2 weeks after that. So these last 2 games, they've scored 34 and 40 points and 34 points, but then their last loss was a 40-17 loss against the Buccaneers. So they're a weird team. It's hard to say how they will fare out in the playoffs. But I do have them in this game. I think that the Texans have struggled mightily without Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, especially since Tank Dell. And you saw it in that Chiefs and Texans game. As soon as Tank Dell went out, the Texans couldn't get anything going offensively for the rest of the game. And the following week, they had 0 offensive points. They had 2 points off of safety in that entire game. So C.J. Stroud, he's not a bad quarterback. He's going to be a good quarterback in this league. He's going to be a franchise guy, in my opinion. But he is struggling right now without his 2 top receivers, and it shows. And I think it's going to be a quiet exit in the first round for the Texans. I've got the Chargers in this one.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, too, I think Herbert's ability to not only, kind of unlock that potential you talked about under Harbaugh, but it's also like, I felt like the thing he was missing in previous years was like, can he go down, lead the 2-minute drill, and win a football game with the limited resources that he does? He just doesn't have much around him. And I think we've seen a lot more this year where he doesn't even have to really be in that situation, because the Chargers are winning these big games. They're winning them by a lot. Of course, like you mentioned, losing to the Chiefs, but we know how hard it is to beat the Chiefs. So I agree with you, and I think it is one of those scary things where, like you mentioned, I mean, the Chargers have certainly been scouting the Chiefs a lot this season, and now they have a few weeks to scout even more. Same could be said about the Chiefs scouting the Chargers, but obviously it's a sort of David versus Goliath matchup. So I think it's going to be really interesting. But I agree. I think the Texans are just kind of in a weird position. Like they felt like they were sort of out of the rebuild heading into this year. And, now they sort of have to go back to phase 1. They have tons of potential. Will Anderson on defense, young guy. The list goes on. C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, tons of potential. It just feels like, to your point, it's not really being used in the right way, of course, with injuries as well. But injuries are sort of inevitable at this point for every team, it feels like. So I think we both agree there. Chargers, I think, are going to win pretty soundly.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do my best here not to keep talking about the Chiefs because they're not playing in this round, but we're both kind of assuming that this is going to be the second round matchup. But I don't know, just looking at these other games, we'll get into it, but it's not a guarantee, and it's any given Sunday. I think it's going to be the Chargers personally, but this is also, I wanted to mention, the first time in the Mahomes era where the Chiefs they've been in the playoffs at the same time as 2 of their division rivals. They've been in the same playoff as just the Raiders or just the Broncos. But this is like, really, if we're going to play, of these 3 teams that we're going to potentially play in the second round, it's going to be the Chargers or the Broncos. It's going to be. So we'll just have to wait and see. But That one's an interesting one. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, moving on. Pittsburgh and Baltimore. I think this is going to be an interesting one. Pittsburgh and Baltimore split the season series. Steelers won 18-16 on November 17 at home. They lost on the road at Baltimore 34-17 December 21st. The Steelers are on a... Sorry to keep cutting off. There's a lag. But the Steelers are on a 4-game losing streak going into the playoffs, and that's not what you want to see if you're a Steeler fan.
Not at all. I mean... I think for me, like you mentioned, the team has changed a lot. Like the team that beat the Ravens, earlier in the season just really isn't the same team now. I feel like there's a lot of disconnect on offense. It feels like Russell Wilson is sort of showing shades of his Broncos self. It's not being able to lead the team down the field and win. I mean, we saw that game a few days ago on primetime against the Bengals. He had an opportunity to go down, win the football game with a field goal. He's, is throwing checkdowns with a few minutes left. Clock winds down. They lose the football game to the Bengals and, hurts their seeding, pretty greatly. So I think there, and I also didn't like George Pickens in that game as well. And I think that, to my point, there's a lot of offensive disconnect. So I think, I'd be surprised if you disagreed, but I think the Ravens are taking this one pretty easily. I think at least by 2 touchdowns. I mean, we saw the most recent matchup, pretty one-sided. Obviously Lamar playing out of his mind. It feels like he's finally, fully exhausting the resources he has, obviously making it, just 1 game shy of the Super Bowl last year and then sort of just running out of gas in the tank, it felt like, especially on the throwing side. But I feel like, this first-round matchup, they're at home. It's very hard to win in Baltimore as an away team. I think the Ravens have them figured out. But like you mentioned, it is we talked about this with the Chargers and the Chiefs. It is a divisional matchup. Any given Sunday, anything can happen. But I just like right now, I mean, I think the Ravens are so complete in what they're doing. They're very well coached. They have the experience. Not that the Steelers don't have the experience, but obviously it's first year with Russell Wilson under center and his first time in the playoffs, in a couple years. I like the Ravens' experience going to this one, playing at home. Their defense has been incredible. The linebackers, Patrick Queen, and everything they've been able to do. And so I really like them in this game. I think the Ravens win by 2 touchdowns, personally.
So the Ravens have a chip on their shoulder. I mean, ending your season last year, AFC Championship home loss. I mean, that's brutal. They have a chip on their shoulder. I think it's destiny for them and the Bills to match up in the second round. So, shocker, spoiling my next 2 picks, taking the 2 major favorites in both games. But for Pittsburgh and Baltimore, you look back to 2020 with the Pittsburgh Steelers season. I mean, everybody knows they started, 11-0. They lost their last 3 of 4 and lost in the first round of the playoffs that year. So the Steelers have shown. I know this is a different team. Yeah, it's the Browns. I know this is a completely different team. It's 5 years ago, but I mean, look what happened back then. You go into the playoffs on a slump, on a cold streak, and I mean it's hard to interpret their last game against the Bengals because they lost it, but only by 2 points. But the Bengals aren't very good, so it's not like it's a good way of saying, oh, well, hey, look, the Steelers competed against the Bengals, because I feel like everybody's living in 2021 with this Bengals team not making the playoffs, but they're not good this year. So I honestly, I don't think the Steelers are going to be very competitive in this game. I want it to be a competitive game. I'll be rooting for them to beat the Ravens, because I want the Chiefs to play the Steelers in the divisional. Like, let's be real, that'd be the best outcome for the Chiefs. So absolutely I'll be rooting for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game. But I mean, that's not going to happen, bro. It's not going to happen. I got the Ravens in this one. I'm with you. I think at least plus 10.5 spread. It's got to be. I'm taking that spread any day.
Yeah. Well, and then we go on to the next one, and I also hate to pick the obvious favorite, but I just want to say ahead of time, I think the Broncos, it's very commendable what they were able to do this year. They feel like they're years ahead of their rebuild. And Bo Nix, I mean, I watched the guy play in college at Oregon. I actually watched his pro day, and I always thought he was a great quarterback, but it didn't seem like he was a guy that was going to translate to the NFL well. And it's not like he's like the most flashy, statistically, especially in this rookie class with, Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams and whatnot. But he feels like the guy that, is going to be playing in the NFL for a long time, just given what he's been able to do in year one. And we'll talk about Jaden Daniels in a minute, but I think for the Broncos, it's been a great year. And I mean, you can speak on your behalf too, because you obviously played them twice, but I think it's very, cool to see them kind of, come out of the water, miss the play. Obviously, the last time they made the playoffs, they won the Super Bowl a decade ago at this point, and now they've really are ahead of their rebuild. It feels like they're really ahead of their time, and it feels like that's behind Bo Nix. It's behind the coaching. It's behind the defense. The defense has looked great this year relative to other years, and I'm proud of them. But I think Buffalo, obviously, they're 8-0 at home. They're, like you mentioned, they beat the Chiefs, and that's very hard to do. Obviously, playing in Buffalo is one of the hardest things to do, probably other than playing at Arrowhead, right? And so I think, Buffalo, I think, is going to win this game pretty significantly. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 3-score game, like a 17-point game. No disrespect to the Broncos, but it just feels like the Bills, it's sort of destiny for them to, not only extend their home winning streak, but also, prove what they have to prove, as one of the many teams in this bracket that haven't won a Super Bowl in their history. And I mean, obviously, it feels like destiny right now with how, Josh Allen's playing and what he's been able to do with his limited resources, and obviously Cook, in the backfield, playing great and everything. So I think it's going to be a 3-score game, but I think the Broncos will be back at this point for sure.
Look, in my opinion, I think Josh Allen deserves the MVP this year. What he's been able to do is incredible. And I know for the Buffalo Bills and their fans, they think that this is their time, and they think this is their year. They also, like the Ravens, got a chip on their shoulder. But every year or every other year, there's one team, maybe two, that make the playoffs, like a last seed team, where they're too young and stupid to know that they're not supposed to be doing good in the playoffs. And they can make some noise. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, the Broncos are going to win, because I don't think they will win. But I do disagree with you on the 3-score part. I think it's going to be a far closer game than people anticipate. I think the Broncos will be within 7 at most at the end of this game. I think it's going to be a close one. And I mean, I still got Buffalo, but the Broncos, they've got a great defense. Bo Nix has been performing very well this year. The offense has been on a heater. They're a dangerous team because I feel like they're a team that is complete. They've got a lot of youth and inexperience. That's going to be their downfall. But they're a team that's for the most part complete, and because they're the 7th seed, they're going to get overlooked, and they can make some noise in this game. And if they upset, dare I say, if they upset the Bills, I'm not so sure I'd be too shocked about that. But I do, of course, have the Bills winning this game.
Yeah, I respect the take. And a reminder, too, that only one 7 seed has ever won a playoff game. That was last year when the Packers absolutely blew out the Cowboys. But I do agree. I mean, I don't think it's, obviously that's a silly thing to say. It's impossible because it's not. But I think, too, at the same time, you're right. I mean, the Broncos know what it feels like to play in cold weather. They're way ahead of schedule, and their defense, obviously that's what they're going to need to do to stop Josh Allen is absolutely flood the pocket, and they've been able to do that a lot this year. And their defense too. I mean, it's you could probably speak from more experience than me having them in your division, but I mean, I absolutely think that this could be one of those matchups where I'm still going to stand by my take where it's a 3-score game, but I think it also is one of those games where it's like we see the Broncos and we're like, okay, this team's going to contend next year based on, that maybe they gave the Bills hell and we're going to, really take them seriously next year. I think it could be one of those things where we see how they play this week and really take that into account next year. And I mean, I think it's fun. I mean, obviously the AFC, maybe not as fun for you having multiple teams in the AFC West contend for the playoffs and having to worry about that now, but it's fun. I feel it's like the AFC West is sort of vintage right now, aside from the Raiders. But I think the Broncos could certainly do something. But I do think the Bills, like you said, it feels like this year, and their fans are saying it. This year feels like the year that they're going to finally. I'm not going to necessarily make my Super Bowl pick yet, but it feels like one of those years where they're finally going to do something impactful that has you, saying more than, oh, they choked, oh, they did this. They're gonna make they're gonna make it far, and so I think we'll just have to see. But I know for you, obviously, having two other teams in your division is an interesting field. I'm sure because you probably the last time the Chargers made the playoffs was what, at least 5 years ago at this
No, it
point.
was it was
And
it, when they choked that lead 2 years ago against Jacksonville.
sorry, I was thinking of the Philip Rivers
Yeah, yeah.
game a couple years ago. Yeah, that that is true. Um, but yeah, no, we'll just have to see. So I guess we're even on all our picks in the AFC wild card across the board. Um, but do you have any sort of, obviously you're pulling for the Chiefs, that's your team, and I think the analytics and history say, the Chiefs are, the team to certainly not only beat, but the team to be the most revered, given their experience in three Super Bowls. But is there any sort of, like you mentioned the Broncos, but is there any sort of like dark horse maybe prediction you have coming out of the wild card? Not necessarily like a team winning or losing, but like something significant that could come out of this round, maybe a team or player that, like, maybe not everyone has their eyes on, kind of thing.
Players, I don't know. Look, just look at all these matchups. I don't think Houston's going to be very competitive, just based on how they've been playing ever since the Tank Dell injury. And I don't think that the Pittsburgh Steelers have played well enough in the last month to put up a fight against Baltimore. The only thing I can see happening is a Denver upset out of all of this. I just don't see it happening though, because again, the Bills, they've had such a magical run this year. Josh Allen, I like I said, I think is going to win MVP this year. I think he at least deserves to. They've been an incredible team. They have a chip on their shoulder. They want to get to the Chiefs, and they want to beat the Chiefs. They want to get their first Super Bowl, and they have a team that's damn built for it. But like, dude, like I said, the Broncos, they're too young and stupid to know that they're not supposed to be competitive in this. But I think they're going to be. They played the Chiefs very, very well in both games this year. Yes, one of them was against Carson Wentz and the backups, but the other one it came down to a blocked field goal. They should have beat us in that game. They should have swept us this year. So they've played the Chiefs tough. They're not scared of the Chiefs, and that's kind of a dark horse. I don't know about players. I think, yeah, I don't know, man. I think you're gonna see the typical Buffalo's all Josh Allen, Baltimore's all Lamar Jackson, and then I think Herbert and McConkey is gonna light up the scoreboard against Houston.
Yeah. I will say for the Ravens specifically, like, this is obviously their first year with Derrick Henry, and I'm sure when we talk about the Eagles, we can talk about Saquon as well. His first year with the team and what he's been able to do. But I wonder how that sort of changes their. Obviously, we've seen a full regular season with Derrick Henry in the backfield, but obviously we've noticed though in the past few years with Lamar in the playoffs is he's not been able to make that throw that's going to win them the game. I wonder how that changes now, having, of course they've had good running backs in the past, J.K. Dobbins, others, to that level as well. But having Derrick Henry in the backfield, that is certainly going to change their game plan, and it's definitely changed their game plan this season as a whole. But now in the playoffs, it's a different animal. Having a guy like that, where maybe maybe Lamar Jackson doesn't have to necessarily put all the weight on his shoulders to make that big run or make that big throw. So that's sort of my thing to look out for. It's how is Derrick Henry's impact going to affect Baltimore's playoff run as a whole, because it's obviously changed their route as a whole, as a team. So I think that should be interesting as we head into the playoffs.
Is it controversial to say that Derrick Henry should be in the running for comeback player of the year? I mean, this guy's playing like his prime self this year. I feel like he's been, like, the last few years, nobody's really worried about him. It could be because he was on the Titans, right? But
yeah,
I don't know, man. He's been damn good this year. It's just, but the playoffs are just a different animal. You get better defenses. Let's see who's going to game plan for him. Let's see who's going to contain him the most. We'll just have to wait and see. But
yeah,
it'll be fun. So moving on, let's go to the NFC side of the bracket, shall we? And this is going to be a fun one here. Talking about Rams hosting the Vikings.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it looks like our bracket is a little bit off in the background, but um, obviously, we've seen this matchup before, and I've had actually the pleasure sort of being close. Obviously, I go to USC, so I'm close to the Rams. I hear a lot of Rams talk, and not only that, but being able to sort of hear what's going on with them, and I feel like for the Rams, they're sort of like the Chiefs in the way that obviously not to the same respect. Obviously, the Chiefs finished with a much better record, and the Chiefs are obviously multiple time Super Bowl champions. But both these teams have won Super Bowls in the past few years, and it feels like the Rams kind of have a little bit of that black magic a little bit in being able to pull out these games where it's like, how did the Rams win that? And they've had some of those games this year. They have big time wins this year. They swept the 49ers, won the games they needed to win down the stretch. Obviously lost this week to the Seahawks in Seattle, but the game was really just for seeding purposes. But I honestly think we'll look at the Vikings. I'm rooting for the Vikings. They're kind of my team going into it. I mean, their quarterback and second receiver in Jordan Addison and Sam Darnold went to USC, and that's my school. So I'm rooting for the Vikings, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams win this game. I don't think home field advantage is really that important for the Rams. I mean, obviously, we can talk all about how LA is just not really a big NFL town, really, but their fans have shown up, and I'll give them that. But the Vikings fans travel, and I think really the Vikings will play a good game, especially they're going to have chips on their shoulder as well. They never won a Super Bowl. They have a quarterback who really wasn't given a fair chance really until now. But I think at the end of the day, the Rams are hot right now, and I of course, except for the Seahawks game this week, but the Vikings did not look good against the Lions at all. Their offense completely died. They couldn't work it in the red zone. They couldn't push the ball well. I honestly think I'm going to pick the Rams in this one. And I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a one-score game, maybe even less than a touchdown, like 3 points. But I think the Rams, they already beat them this year. The Rams have one of the best young defenses in the league. Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, those are two of the youngest and most stout defensive guys we've seen, out of this rookie class. And not to mention Kinchins and other guys. And on offense, I mean, they have a gauntlet of guys. Kyron Williams, Matthew Stafford has that Super Bowl winning experience. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tyler Higbee. I think the Rams are destined to, I think my early hot take is the Rams make the NFC Championship this year. I really think they could.
Wow.
So I think the Rams are winning this game. Yeah.
Before this loss to the Seahawks, in which, of course, the Rams rested Matthew Stafford and the majority of their starters, so it was meaningless for them. Before that, they were on a 5-game win streak, including a 44-42 defeat of the Buffalo Bills at home.
Yeah.
However, the other games, the offense has been nothing short of underwhelming. 19 against the Jets, 12 against the Niners, 13 against the Cardinals. But then you look back and they put 44 against the Rams. So it's really, is the offense going to show up in this game? And if they do, then I'm with you. Rams are winning. I think the Vikings showed in this last regular season game against the Lions that they're not who a lot of people think they are. At least for me. They don't seem like a threat to me. They've won a lot of close games this year. And they've put up an underwhelming amount of points, in my opinion. Well, actually, you know what? No, I'm going to take that back. They put 27, 30. It's more than the Chiefs. I can't talk shit. But, I mean, I don't know. You look back, you had a 12-7 win against the Jaguars, and, it's their defense, man. Their defense is giving up a lot of points. 25 against the Packers, 24 against the Seahawks, 27 against the Bears. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's worth noting that they played in LA against the Rams on October 24, and the Rams won that game 30-20. So yeah. It's one of those games. This one and the Bucs game to me are the two, like, iffy, could go either way games. But as far as this one goes, I'm riding with the Rams with you. I like the upset here. I think it's an upset. Is it an upset? I would assume it's an upset, just based on the record. But I've got the Rams in this one.
And I think it's interesting too because we didn't really see this much on the AFC side per se, but it's two quarterbacks that I think have sort of similar styles. Sam Darnold and Matthew Stafford, sort of guys that sit in the pocket and you kind of weigh out their options, have good receivers. So I think at that point it kind of comes down to and two players that have very good tailbacks in their gauntlet in Aaron Jones and Kyron Williams. And so I think it really comes down to how does the defense stack up. And I think the Rams defense, it's really hard to count out this defense right now. What it's been able to do, it's so young, it's so versatile from a player standpoint. These guys are doing a ton of different things. Not that the Vikings don't have a good defense, they do, but I think, like you said, it's like they're certainly not the team we saw a few weeks ago. And they're one of the few teams as well that's really been able to stay healthy on the offensive side. Rams haven't, but the Rams have guys that have come back. They also got a week of rest, and that's something that an extra week of rest with not resting all their starters against the Seahawks. And so I think that was sort of a controversial decision at the time for the seeding, knowing that they were probably going to lose that game. But at the same time, it's like these guys are going to have a lot of time off. Are they going to be fresh? Or are they going to be rusty? And I think it comes down to that as well.
Mm-hmm. So the Vikings are favorites in this game. They're plus 125. So not overwhelming favorites by any means. The Rams are just plus 105 underdogs, which is a small number. In fact, of all these wild card weekend games, this is the closest game predicted by the betting market, which of course I'm using Hard Rock Bet, which is a Florida thing. But that as far as the Hard Rock Bet market goes, that is the closest margin of the money line for any of these wild card games. So really, could go either way, and I think the Rams are going to take this one as the underdog. I mean, look, how often do we see with 6 wild card games? These are the best teams in the league. They're in the playoffs for a reason. It's almost a guarantee every year that there's going to be 1 or 2 upsets in this field. So I mean, I'm not gonna play it safe and go all favorites on this bracket. I gotta go with an underdog. I'm gonna take the Rams in this one.
Yeah, agreed. So we go on to one close to you, Tampa and Washington. And we talked about this a little bit before the stream, but technically a rematch, even though the Commanders were the Washington football team back in 2020 and looked hell of a lot different back then. It was Chase Young and Taylor Heineke headlining that team back then, and of course Tom Brady playing for the Bucs. But now in 2025, we have a rematch between these two teams, and it's going to be in Tampa. It's a really interesting story because it's 2 quarterbacks that were obviously at some point picked in the top 2 of the draft, and Baker Mayfield, Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is the surefire offensive rookie of the year, and then you have Baker, who is kind of in the second year of sort of tooling back with the Bucs, and it's a home game for the Tampa Bay, but we could talk about this, but I think really it's another game, like you said, where it could go either way. Both of these teams have had iffy seasons. I think for Washington, we could say the same. We said the same about the Broncos. They feel ahead of schedule from a rebuild and retooling standpoint. I didn't think that Jaden Daniels was going to be able to take this team to playoffs in year 1, but he did it as the number 2 pick, which is very commendable. But I think it's an interesting thing because obviously Washington has been able to win games in sort of kind of atypical fashion. Obviously that Atlanta game, getting into the playoffs and sort of just kind of doing what they need to do, and a lot of that is behind Jaden Daniels and their defense as well. But of course the Buccaneers, they navigated an easy division. I'll say that. I mean, obviously the South is always pretty easy, and so they had maybe an easier route to the playoffs than some other teams. But Mike Evans is an elite receiver, and I think he's going to wreak havoc on that Commanders secondary. I just don't think it's going to be enough. And I think the Commanders are going to win this game on the road. I think it's going to be by 5 points or so. No more than 5, really? Honestly. I think it's going to... Yeah.
Commanders.
I want to take an upset again.
I didn't see that coming from you. The Bucs are a bipolar team. As bipolar as I've seen a team this season. I mean, you talk about putting a beat down on the Chargers in their house, 40-17, and then losing to the Cowboys the very next week. I mean, that's just like, it's tough. And then the following week, they absolutely crushed their division rival Panthers, putting up 48 just for them to have to play a must-win to make the playoff game against the Saints at home in Raymond James Stadium, and you had to come back from behind to win the game by 1 score. So it's like, what, you don't know what Bucs team is showing up each week. Are we going to get the Bucs team that whooped the Chargers and the Panthers and the Giants? Or are we going to see the Bucs team that lost at home to the 49ers and lost to the Cowboys on the road with a backup quarterback? Or are we going to see the Bucs team that, you know, took the Chiefs to overtime and and put these beatdowns on these other teams? You don't know. You don't know. But I think the home field advantage plays such a huge role in this, and I think that Jayden Daniels is going to be a good quarterback in this league. He's been amazing this year. Washington just went from 0 to hero in 1 year. I mean, it's been a good year for Washington and their fans, and I like seeing a team like Washington have success. You know, a team that you don't really see too often find it. That being said, like the Broncos, I think the youth and experience is going to catch up to them in the first round. Tampa having the home field advantage is huge. I think Tampa's winning this game.
Yeah, it is worth noting too, and this would help your case a bit, that these two teams played in week one. And the Bucs did win, but that was Jayden Daniels' first game in the NFL. So first start, yeah. Was it week one, or it was Jayden Daniels' first game?
It was week one, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they played at the very beginning of the season. Jayden Daniels, you know, obviously hadn't had a taste of what regular season NFL football was like. So I don't take that super, you know, seriously. I do think it is important though. And obviously the Bucs have changed too. Back then, obviously, we didn't see Bucky Irving, you know, have as big an impact as a rookie as well. They've used him a lot. It was more Rachaad White back then, and obviously Bucky Irving has moved a lot more into that role. And so I think both teams have changed, and I think that's an interesting thing to note. However, I do think Jayden Daniels now having, you know, a full slate under his, you know, schedule under his belt is going to be big. Washington's also on a 5-game win streak. We talked about getting hot at the right time, and they're 5-3 on the road. You did mention, you know, the struggles for Jayden Daniels and being a rookie quarterback on the road. However, they are 5-3 on the road, not bad. Tampa Bay has won 2 in a row. But obviously, they've, like you said, had a very turbulent season. You know, it is a winning season, but still a turbulent one. And they're not a very good home team. Let's be real. They went 5-4 at home. That's okay. It's above average. But I think, you know, given those things, I wouldn't be surprised if Jayden Daniels really balls out, shows the NFL he's legit. And I will say, I think Mike Evans is going to have a big game, but I don't think it's enough. And I think Bucky Irving will too. I think he's going to have a good game up the middle, you know, kind of putting that gut punch in on certain drives, converting short gains. But I do think the Commanders are going to win this game.
I agree with you when you say that week one, you can't really do anything with that information. It was back in September. It's every team's most vulnerable week of the year. You're just starting. You're meshing. You got new guys coming in. It's so hard to take a week one game and be like, see what happened 3.5, 4 months ago? Yeah, you just can't do that. So, Bucks blew him out. Who cares? It was week one. You talk about Bucky Irving, too. He's been incredible for the Bucks. And Mike Evans is still good old Mike Evans. You know, he's still balling. You talk about the home record for the Bucks. It doesn't really concern me too much. But what Bucks fans need to be worried about is what Baker Mayfield is going to show up. Is it the one that's throwing terrible picks, or is it the one that's making great passes? And you talk about the Bucks being a bipolar team, or I talk about that. So Baker Mayfield is a bipolar quarterback when he's making his throwing decisions. You know, you don't know what version of the Bucks are going to show up each week. You don't know what version of Baker Mayfield is going to show up each week. But if they are both on, the team and the quarterback, they're dare I say nearly unstoppable. This Bucks team, they can make some noise if they click at the right time. And as much as I would love to see an eventual Chiefs-Bucks Super Bowl rematch this year, I want that revenge, even though it's against my home city. I don't see that happening, but I do think the Bucks will go on to the the divisional round of the playoffs.
Not a bad case for it. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I think that's another one too, where it's like we talked about. Not only could it go either way, but I think it's like it's kind of predictable. I think who's going to shine in those games. Like we've seen, Mike Evans be so consistent. Bucky Irving, another guy I watched at Oregon last year, and I didn't expect him to have a type of role like this in year one as well. So I think we're going to see a lot of the storylines that we've seen. Also, Jaden Daniels balling out. I think it's just what team wants it more kind of thing. And I think a lot of things would tell you that Washington would, of course, with it being their first playoff season in a few years and Jaden Daniels' first year, but also the Bucks are at home and, won their division and whatnot. But we're going into another matchup that happened in week one, Eagles-Packers, but it was in Brazil. So I don't know that, we talk about not even taking it seriously. I think let's take it even less seriously. It was that field was ridiculously poorly treated for, guys slipping so I wouldn't take that game at all. We should note that the Eagles did win that game. This Eagles team feels very, they feel a lot more complete than other Eagles teams, and I think obviously adding Saquon Barkley does that to you. Obviously, they lost Jason Kelce to retirement, but it hasn't seemed to phase them too much. But they have, not going to lie, like the Eagles have had some losses that are sort of head scratchers in this, season. Obviously, losing the Commanders amid the Commanders, miraculous win streak they've had in the past, 5 weeks. But I think the Eagles are still going to win this game. The Packers have had, injury problems plague them. Of course, Christian Watson had to be carted off the field last week. He's not going to play. It just doesn't feel like the Packers are the same Packers from last year. They sort of run with that, we don't have a wide receiver one type of thing with Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, among other guys. But I think adding Josh Jacobs helped. I just think really for the Eagles, they're going to be at home. It's hard to play in Philadelphia. And offensively, the Packers are a better team. Let's be real. They have more options, and they're really more versatile, I think, from what they're able to run. But I think the Eagles' defense, it's the best in the league. I think it's going to be easily, able to shut down the Packers. But I'm not going to lie. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be like a one-score game. 30-23 type of score, high scoring, but a pretty sound, convincing win for the Eagles. So I have the Eagles winning this one.
Yeah, it's hard to dispute that. The Eagles had a 10-game win streak up until December 22, and they lost by 3 points on the road to the Commanders. The Eagles are a very complete team, in my opinion. Their defense at times has question marks, but their offense is really, really good, led by Jalen Hurts. And they're, after losing the Super Bowl 2 years ago, they kind of struggled that following regular season, of course, towards the back half when they collapsed and lost to Tampa in the first round. But they're back this year with a vengeance, and they're back to their normal selves, I feel. And unfortunately for the Packers, them choking that game last week against the Bears, where the Bears ended their 11-game losing streak against the Packers dating back to 2018. The Packers screwed themselves by choking that away, because instead of the Packers going to Tampa, they now go to Philly, which is a considerably harder place to win road football games, especially in the postseason. I am with you. As much as I want to be fun and say I think Green Bay is going to pull off an upset, I'm tempted to. I want to, especially because it's hard to go against Pete Schrager and his preseason predictions. Of course, the NFL Network from Good Morning Football, he's correctly predicted the last 5 Super Bowl winners. And he predicted Chiefs-Packers in the Super Bowl this year in the preseason. So it's hard to go against him. He has a great track record, but with Christian Watson going out to a torn ACL and not obviously missing the playoffs and probably all of next season too, I think that really, really dampers Green Bay's chances of winning this road playoff game. As much as I want to say upset, I don't see it happening. I think Philly's winning this one.
Yeah, and I almost forgot to mention this, but Jordan Love was also hurt last week, and I think he is going to play. He's talking about how he feels ready to play against the Eagles, but this might not be the Jordan Love that we've seen in the past. This is going to be an injured Jordan Love, a guy who's playing a little bit more cautiously. So that's why I think really in maybe in a normal environment, I would take the Packers offense just being, what it is with the versatility, Jaden Reed and those, Dobbs, Christian Watson, Josh Jacobs. I mean, that's a gauntlet. Not to say that the Eagles don't have that. AJ Brown, uh, Saquon Barkley, what they have, Devontae Smith, what they have on offense is very special. But I think that, at the end of the day, it's like we don't even know what version of Jordan Love we're going to get given he's been hurt. And it's just been an overall kind of turbulent season for the Packers. It's also a really hard division to play in the NFC North. So I have the Eagles winning this one. I agree.
So just to recap, we have all the same predictions, but we're indifferent on Tampa and Washington. We couldn't be the exact same. Not this early. Conference championship maybe, but no, there has to be some little bit of a competition there just to see who's right.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't remember what my record was last playoffs. I know it wasn't too hot coming off of a perfect record in 2022. I'm never going to let that one down because that was just I amazed myself with that. But
that's crazy. I can't believe that.
Yeah. But I followed up the following season. I think I went like close to 500. I wasn't very good, but I got to recoup myself this year. Make sure I stay on track here. But we'll see. It's going to be fun. I cannot believe it's already 2025. It's playoff season. This season went by so fast. I had gone to the Chiefs game in Atlanta week 3, and that feels like it happened 2 weeks ago, even though it was the 3rd week of the regular season. It's crazy. Even the Bucs game, the Bucs versus Chiefs game, that was the halfway game of the regular season. It feels like last week that I went. It's really every year that goes by, I feel like the older I get, the quicker these seasons go by, and it's crazy, man. I feel like this season just started, and we're already here in the playoffs. But I cannot wait. It's gonna be amazing. I'm so excited. This is like my favorite time of the year. We're gonna have to wait and see what happens, but I'm pumped for this.
Yeah, go watch CRB's vlog of that game, the Bucs Chiefs game. Crazy game. He was there. Drop a like on this video too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Hell yeah. We've been doing this shit for 5 years. So, I mean, anybody who keeps coming back, appreciate you. New viewers, appreciate you too. We're just two random dudes on the internet that with like hardly any following at all that just love talking football. So, we're obviously not sitting here trying to like grow ourselves. Yeah, views are cool and all, likes are cool, shouts are cool, but we're not sitting here trying to. I don't know for you, but I know for me, I'm not trying to make a career out of this. So, but we do this for fun. We don't have to do this. We don't have to take time out of our days and sit down and record an hour long stream like video talking about predictions. We do it for fun. So make sure if you like the predictions, if you like the insights, just the overall production of the video, or our predictions, go ahead and give both of us a subscription, please. It'd be great. Could really use the support, especially a guy like Kasey. He's trying to do big things with his career, and he's done a lot of shit behind the scenes, and this guy's going places.
Hope so. Thank you.
So with that being said, man, Kasey, see you next week. Thanks for being back another year. It's a pleasure to do this with you every single year.
Likewise, man. Let's see what happens.
All right, man. See you next week. Peace out.